Coming up, when is a full-time councillor not a full-time councillor? Juggling the infrastructure dollars, potholes, the gift that keeps on giving, for the media at least, and should councillors reopen divisional offices? Join me for Over the Back Fence with Ashleigh Mack and Walter Williams. It's Thursday, February 18, 2021, and I'm Alan Roebuck. Welcome to Ipswich Today, which acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which it is produced and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. This podcast is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. It's time again to be joined by my Ipswich panel for Over the Back Fence. Walter Williams, he's called Ipswich home for 30 years. You hear his voice everywhere. Welcome, Walter.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Great to be back.
And Ashleigh Mack, who was born in Ipswich and keeps blaming growing up under power lines at Ebervale for being a media tart, and he's also a small business owner. Welcome, Ash.
And also the bald patch, by the way.
I missed that again. Say that.
We weren't going to mention the bald patch.
The other thing, the other side effect of the power lines, the bald patch.
Let's get straight into it. This is number 2 of Over the Back Fence. Now, when is a full-time councillor not a full-time councillor? It's been reported that 3 councillors, Nicole Johnnick, Russell Milligan and Andrew Fechner, admit to doing other work, just like having a second job. Is that so bad? Over to you, Ash.
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't think it's a problem at all. I think indentured slavery went out like quite a few hundred years ago. We're not supposed to do that anymore. And most people who are in business these days have multiple streams of income. I can't see why these guys can't, as long as it doesn't conflict with anything.
Walter, how are you feeling about it?
Bit torn, to tell you, honestly. A promise to voters to represent them full-time as a councillor, right? And the whole crazy 2-councillor electorate scheme thing, which we could talk about another day. But it's like co-captains in football. But anyway, another time. Just doesn't work. But as for second job, these people went into these positions not being forced, but asked to serve their town, their city, their country, whatever. That was their choice. And they're paid quite nicely. I've done a little research, and last figures, it looks like around base figure, 2,350 weekly. And that's not bad, but that's bad. And then, of course, you've got the expenses on top of this. Your vehicle expenses is around $20,000 a year, as I understand it. Plus, it just adds up.
Okay, so you're torn over it. Look, I've got a couple of views on it, and this might put it in perspective why the discussion has come up and why it's been turned into a media story. Back in 1995, amalgamation was sold as making councillors full-time. So we've had the full-time thing at us since 1995. Now, under administration, and Greg Chimello to be specific, he set the scene for this, are councillors full-time or not? Well, the reality is they're self-employed, basically, and they can work as much or as little as they like, as long as they turn up for their required meetings and are contributing in a meaningful way. Are they full-time? Aren't they? But
wouldn't you as a ratepayer want them to be working as much as they possibly can?
Absolutely.
For their electorate?
Yes.
And not having a day job and then a second job as well? I
think they are paid as a full-time councillor, let's face it. And if there's too much moonlighting going on, next election they won't be there.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Ash?
Performance would probably rule. But when you get to these sorts of positions, why would you... What is full-time? Like, do you
want... The old-fashioned 40 hours a week?
Okay, well, 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Most successful people who are running businesses and things like that, they're working, up to 60, 80 hours a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So there is time outside of their commitment. If they're putting in their 40 hours for the council, great. But if they want to do something on the side, start a business, start something for the family, I don't see a problem with it.
Well, let's talk about divisional offices then. Still in the news. Should they be re-established? I say a big fat no. And before I go to you guys for your thoughts, I'll tell you why I say big fat no. Because before they closed, some 90 to 95% of all calls from residents did not touch a councillor. They went to the call centre to get resolved without councillor involvement. Now, the people calling for divisional officers will be the handful of whingers that used to call into divisional officers more as a social occasion. I used to see it myself. It was just a do-drop-in centre for people to pass the time. No meaningful transactions could be conducted in those old divisional offices. You couldn't even pay your rates or the dog rego. So what was the point of them?
Well, probably to pay rent to some of the landlords around town who are
short of a dollar.
Well, some of them are. Like we've got so many empty shops around the town, you know, and at $300 a square metre, which is probably what you can get places for at the moment, that's not expensive.
Walter, your thoughts?
Yeah. Look, I like the idea of an electorate office for councillors, just to make them more accessible, if nothing else. But I was not aware of those statistics that you just shared with us then, that most of it went to the central trafficking area.
That's correct, and that's what it's for. Now, people can still meet with councillors. They're doing the meeting with constituents now, either at South Street or either of the libraries, which have meeting rooms, and it's easy enough to book a meeting with a councillor if you want one. So, you know, you're talking Rosewood, you're talking Springfield Central, you're talking the main library downtown, you're talking Redbank Plains and Redbank Plaza, I think at Redbank Plaza, I'm not sure. But basically, each end and the middle of the city, it's easy enough to meet a councillor in one of those council facilities.
Okay.
Well, that's good. You need that connection sometimes. And what about taking that one step further and having public forums like they used to? Town hall meetings.
Town hall meetings, yes. Well, we haven't heard any of that lately, but there's something to contact your local councillor about.
I think COVID put a stop on those for a while.
Oh, yes, of course, with safe distancing.
On to our next topic, the sudden departure of Council Senior Executive Charlie Dill. Now, I do hear it was amicable, if not sudden, from a public point of view. Now, Charlie had been there about 7 years, but it is a tough job, guys. You've got to juggle so many priorities. It was kind of a mega department, everything from building roads to mowing parks. Walter, your thoughts?
Look, as you say, it is a very demanding role. He was the GM of Infrastructure and Environment, as I understand it, in the last almost 2 years of his working life with council. But he'd spent something like 7 years at Ipswich City Council and well paid for it, nicely remunerated. But it is a little bit of a shock departure, isn't it? We didn't see it coming.
No, and there have been some murmurs about projects delayed, or for whatever reason. This does happen when you're building big things; they do get delayed. But whether they could have been improved, I don't think we'll ever know the answer. Ash, what do you think?
Well, it's a funny thing about the Ipswich Council at the moment, because if you do suddenly disappear, that used to thinking something negative about it, the gossip starts to happen through town. Right, and it's a bit of a pity. I said when a few of my friends who wanted to run for council, it'd be like drawing a crosshairs on your forehead this first term, because it doesn't matter what you do, you'll still be tainted by what happened before.
Exactly.
So Charlie might be as innocent as a newborn child, but there'll be people out there spreading rumours anyway.
Yeah, well, potholes are a classic one for people to whinge about. Last time you described the whole subdivision thing as a Ponzi scheme, Ash, and council would never ever keep up with road maintenance in the older suburbs. Have you had any more thoughts on that?
Well, the Ponzi scheme, I actually got that from a YouTube video they were talking about it in the States, because what we do, we come in and we build this, these little estates, tell the developers to build them, but the bill to look after them for the next 50 years goes to the council, and that, they fall apart after 20 years. So there's no way, it just becomes more and more expensive. So that's why I think it's a Ponzi scheme.
It sounds plausible. I'll have to track down an expert on that, and ask the question, do current rates cover the cost of maintenance of existing council roads? Interesting one.
I'm out at Chua, right?
Yep.
And I'm on the old side. Actually, I bought Seth Forbes' old place, the old Shire Engineer. And Lansdowne Way has never been done up since it was built. And you can see it starting to fall apart, starting to crack up. And they've done a few patches here and there. But I reckon we're 5 years away from needing another redo over here.
Right.
And that's only, in the mid-90s.
Walter?
Well, Oh, mate, we've got to get them fixed. It's basic, isn't it? It's one of the basic jobs, apart from picking up the garbage and all of those kind of things. And it's one of those things that sometimes seems to get missed in the whole process of local government. There was a really interesting comment from Paula Atkinson online. She was among dozens sharing her thoughts on the issue of potholes, and she labelled the roads around East Ipswich as ridiculous, and one in particular, Jacaranda Street, if you're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. She said it needed to be ripped up and redone, and I tend to agree with that. And it's not the only road that needs ripping up and redoing in Ipswich.
Look, I'm not going to make excuses for the maintenance, but we aren't blessed with the best subsoils in parts of our city.
It doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help at all. It turns into a bit of a roller coaster ride. And in fact, a great example is if you look at West Ipswich, the recent upgrade there is already suffering from what they call pavement failure.
Interesting thing about pavement failure and how you tell what the street is like. White Hill Road. Have you ever noticed when you drive along one day that the power poles will be leaning in certain directions, and the next couple of months later they'll be leaning in other directions?
Oh, the soil around there is notorious. Yes.
Yeah, that's all that black soil.
The old black soil.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
It's on dinosaurs.
Moving on to our next one. Let's do a local media watch. See what we can do with this one. I'm always curious that one resident whinging is given the status of many in some media stories. And in this particular one, I think I'm going to refer to Councillor Fechner's car allowance, which has been highlighted. And it's been brought up by Jim Dodrell, who has run for council a couple of times. Now, Jim's always been miffed since he didn't get over the line. And so this is his way of raising awareness. He might have another crack at the next election, who knows. Is Andrew Fechner entitled to claim a car allowance without a car? It doesn't pass the pub test, but it may be quite legal. Walt, what do you think?
Doesn't sound right. It doesn't gel with me that you're claiming a vehicle allowance, but you don't actually have a vehicle. And like I said earlier, that's nearly 20 K's worth. A little bit higher if you're the mayor, apparently, because
How does he get around?
obviously she has more engagements.
Yes.
But
How does he get around?
From all reports, he uses taxis and Ubers.
Well, why don't we just call it a taxi Uber allowance?
Well, maybe it should be in the policy.
Yeah, I think that the nomenclature might be the thing that's causing the problem here, because you've got to get around.
Does Andrew have a driver's license?
Don't know.
He could do what I've done.
What's that?
I bought an electric push bike.
Oh, no.
And the only thing it's done so far is given me sore bottom.
Yeah, look, that might have worked when we had smaller divisions, but I think these mega divisions might make it a bit more difficult. But hey, it's a thought. We talked about it last time, guys, the Ipswich versus Springfield debate. And wouldn't you know it, Deputy Mayor Marnie Doyle comes along and pours a big can of petrol on the whole fire in the last week or so, saying, yes, there is a big problem with it. Is there?
Well, what is she saying the problem is?
Obviously, it's back to fixing up the roads and everything. They're just not getting enough maintenance, and Springfield's all shiny and new, and older parts of Ipswich aren't quite as shiny and new. But that's part of the charm. That's part of the charm of the diversity within Ipswich, surely.
Is it part of the charm, though, if you haven't even got basic things like footpaths in areas that are so well established in a city with this heritage? We don't even have a connecting footpath from the new car parks that would take us down to the river at the moment. They cut off at the end of the car park itself. So there is no, and that's just one example of many. So I think there is still a lot of feeling between people who live in Ipswich and those who are living in Springfield, getting everything shiny and new. And you can understand that. And maybe there is some truth in what Councillor Marnie Doyle is saying.
Well, she might be using that as an excuse to get a bigger budget allocation, because this is the time of the year they'll be behind the scenes talking about money and where to spend it. So maybe it's not so silly after all that Councillor Doyle has come out fighting, as it were. Ash, you were pretty happy living in the bush?
Oh, look, I love it. I'm not as bush as you are, but I love being, like, this is semi-rural out here. I'm on a little bit of acreage. It's nice. Infrastructure's not keeping up because we've got a problem with that over the Mount Crosby road overpass.
That's a big one.
It's ridiculous how. And I think 2 mornings this week, cars have been backed all the way back past the shopping centre trying to get your kids to school. It's not easy for people. Check out the Facebook page that the Caroline people have got. They're always whinging about it. But if we can get the secret out about Ipswich and get some of these Victorians who are moving to Queensland to move in here, it might solve some of our rates problems. We'll have some more rates coming in.
We're almost at the end of our second over the back fence. That means we can actually go back to the first one. And have you had any feedback? Ashleigh?
Oh, I had some feedback. One of my staff in the shop wants a shout out. And I said, look, I'll say hello to all the girls in the shop. There you are, say hello.
Well, you better tell us where the shop is.
Oh, it's in the St Andrews coffee shop. We have the only business I know of that doesn't want to see its customers again.
They're sick of seeing you.
Yes.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yes, that's true too.
Any feedback from you, Walter?
Yeah, some really good feedback. I put it out on my social media, and a lot of people saying about time you got on board a podcast, Walter. It's been 5 years since you were on radio, so you should be doing something with that voice. And here we are together, the three amigos.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. Very much enjoyed our second over the back fence, and we'll do it all again soon. Thanks, Ashleigh.
Ciao.
And thanks, Walter.
Thank you. Cheers, boys.
Ipswich Today is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. This podcast is also listener-supported. Please make a once-only gift or regular donation to help keep it online. Just go to ipswichtoday.com.au and click the donate button at the bottom of the page. You can subscribe for free and share this podcast from your favourite app, including iHeartRadio, or play Ipswich Today from your smart speaker. Music is supplied by Purple Planet Music. This is Alan Roebuck. Thanks for listening.